This is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful engineering leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications from design to delivery with React, Node.js, and Angular. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Welcome to the Level Up Engineering Podcast. I am Karolina Tóth, and I am happy to introduce my guest today, Tom Sommer, who started as a senior software engineer and now works as director of engineering at Redbubble. And he's been doing this career at Redbubble for almost 9 years, so he has a lot to share with us. I'm so glad you could join us all the way from Australia today. Please give us a bit of context about who you are and what your passions are.
Hi, Carolina. Thanks for having me. Very nice to be here. Like you said, I've originated from Germany, so I came to Australia about 15 years ago, and then started working at Redbubble about nine years ago. And like you said, I worked my way up from being a software engineer to being now a director of engineering, and really kind of finding my passion in kind of people and engineering and structure and culture, and this whole a big set of topics that comes with the area. I'm really kind of over the time I've been getting involved into lots of different areas across the Redbubble, like starting internship and junior programs, but also growth frameworks and general kind of how do we establish a culture, how do we have change management at Redbubble. Awesome. And I've been writing about that and have been trying to impact the team a little bit there as well.
Yeah, check out Tom's Medium page where you can read about some of the ideas that we will talk about today.
Yes.
And also about some other things. So with that said, today we are going to talk about building an internship program and facilitating an internship program. So without further ado, let's talk about how you recruit potential engineers or engineers for your internship program.
Yes, it's a good question to start with, because obviously that's when it all begins, how to get people into the internship program, and we've done that a few ways. The first one is to have an open call on the internet and just say, like every other job, say, hey, we have an internship program, why don't you come and join? The more focused way we've done that is to go out to special companies and institutions. So we've had calls at universities where we basically kind of just rocked up to a lecture and said, hey, we're starting an internship program. Who is interested? Or we've partnered with local companies in Australia, in Melbourne, that are topic specific, so boot camps or women in tech groups, which literally went out and said, hello, here we are. We want to build up this program, or we have a new round of this program. Who's interested in joining us? And then starting from there and really trying to get the people in. And I think it really depends on what we're looking for and what people are looking for, where to get the people from. Like we had programs specifically focused on diversity and trying to get as many women into the company as possible, and then we partnered with kind of the women in tech programs. But it really depends on where what the focus of the program is.
Mm-hmm. Since we all know that there is a shortage of software engineers, and it has been going on for quite a while, I have to ask, what are some of the tips and tricks that you can share that make your internship program more attractive than any of your competitors?
Yeah, the two things that we really have focused on, which has worked really well, is we've really ran it as an embedded program. So some programs are kind of like, hey, here's your intern group. You've worked on this project on the side. After 3 months, you come back and show us what you've done. What we've really tried to do is embed interns into teams. So they're all in different teams. They're all working as any other software engineer in teams and getting the full spectrum of experience about what it means to work on a product, what it means to pair with other engineers, what it means to kind of run planning, all this kind of stuff, to give them a full work experience and make sure that they're not just sitting in the corner working on the hobby project and pretending to be part of the company. So that's something that we're really focused on, which is something that we heard of good things about as well from our interns, that they really enjoy that and really like that.
Right. Nobody wants to join an internship program to click at Excel files for 3 months. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So with that said, before you start working with these interns, you somehow have to evaluate them and what their skill level or skill set is. How do you do that? What are some of the ways that you can share?
Yeah, and this comes back a little bit to kind of understanding what the purpose of the internship program is. We ran programs that range from pure work experience, where we literally said, look, if you want to get some work experience in the industry, you can join our intern program. And then that evaluation was very light, so to speak. It wasn't necessarily focused on like you need to have this and this and this skill. It was literally just an open call and say, hey, why don't you come and get some work experience in the industry, and maybe we can give you a leg up. And then the other end of the spectrum is to have internship programs to then recruit interns as full-time engineers afterwards, potentially. And then the evaluation goes a little bit further, because obviously if you want to hire someone as full-time engineers, you need to have them to have a certain level. And this is kind of where we've ultimately replicated a little bit of a lightweight engineering interview for kind of assessment. So instead of going through the full-blown 4 or 5 rounds of interviews that we do for our regular engineers, we've done a smaller version of that for our internships, where we're still assessing around the same topics, but don't go as deep. So don't go as deep technically, and don't go as deep like when we do our architecture session or architecture round with the regular engineer, and we do that on a smaller scale. But we're generally assessing them across different areas, and very much the similar aspects in our regular engineers.
Mm-hmm. Since maybe not all of us are acquainted with your regular interview process, could you share some of the criteria, or specifically whether or not you interview for culture fit or culture ed or soft skills in any sense?
Yeah, we definitely do. We do a lot of soft skill checking. So we don't necessarily do that through a dedicated, here's an interview about culture, here's an interview about soft skills, but we're assessing that throughout all the interviews and really talking about the big things for us are about communication. So how well is the person communicating? Growth and learning, especially important for interns. So one of the things that we really focus on during the internship is kind of how much are the interns willing to grow, and how much are they able to grow in that time, and kind of trying to absorb all the information. And the last thing is, so we had communication, we had growth, and then the last thing is, which just escaped my mind because I had it just a second ago. The last thing is about, no, lost it. Sorry.
That's all right. If it comes back,
there was something else. If I remember it later, I'll come back to it.
Yeah, go ahead. So you do. That's what I am mostly interested in. You do pay attention to the fact that soft skills are important, and you actually have some sort of a criteria up to which you check the potential engineers. Is there anything specific about the technical experience or the technical knowledge that's a must-have for anybody who enters your internship program?
It is, I think Not specifically. So we haven't really gone out and said like you need to be able to be fluent in this language, or you need to be able to know how to write JavaScript or anything like that. Again, what we really focus on with our internships is to have a very basic understanding of kind of the large building stones or the general building blocks. So not necessarily being able to write picture perfect code, but to understand how big things work together, and then just the ability to grow. So, for example, in one of our interviews that we done for the internship, we asked them to kind of go on a whiteboard and talk us through how a URL shortener works. So you take a big URL, you plug it into a website, out comes a short URL, someone puts a short URL into the browser, and then it somehow magically transforms into the big URL. And that might be something that's very straightforward for someone that's been in the industry for 4, 5, 10 years, or maybe even 3 years. But for someone who's just starting out, that reveals quite obviously what kind of core concepts they understand, how things work together, and even just going down to, do they have a basic understanding of how a database works, how that all fits together. And through these kind of things, we're really trying to just get a sense about that basic understanding about technology, the internet, and the building blocks there, and then we can figure out like, okay, they're at a level which we can support, or we might have to kind of unfortunately say no for this candidate.
So it kind of sounds like you are looking for understanding the big picture, and then you teach the smaller building blocks in detail.
Yes.
With that said, let's jump into the specifics of your program, of what you can share with us, how we can go from day 0 of the process to, or day minus a couple of the process to the end, or to the conclusion of the internship program.
Yeah. So the way we've ran it, we usually had it for 12 weeks or 3 months. So we had interns come in as a group. We always felt like the group experience was very important, not only because they could kind of share, but they kind of live the experience together, and they kind of feel like they're not just singled out, but they're kind of having a shared experience. So they come in for 12 weeks. And then, like I said before, they kind of get embedded in teams. So they literally become part of a team for these 12 weeks and behave and act like every other software engineer. The one thing that we're really trying to do during these 12 weeks is to have a high level of support. So we have like everybody else, they have a manager that they can go talk to, and they can kind of have weekly or twice every other week have one-on-ones. We also have a dedicated mentor which sits outside the team. So someone they can go to that's not in the day-to-day, that they can just ask questions about, whether it's technology, whether it's how planning works, or how different parts of the business work. And then the support network within the team is literally just about like pairing and making sure that they have people to talk to, which is obviously in times of COVID is a little bit tricky to arrange, because if you're all in the office, you can just turn around the chair as usual. So that needs just some extra attention to make sure that people feel supported, and people feel like they have someone to talk to and have someone to work with in the day-to-day, really. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the basic cornerstones of this process.
Mm-hmm. And when the 12 weeks are over, I imagine you will not hire everyone of the team. How is that evaluation process? What are some of the steps that you take to make sure that you hire the right people?
Yeah, great question, because that's something that we have taken us a few iterations to get semi-decent. We're probably still not perfect, or we're definitely not perfect there. So at the core is really for us is the growth. So if people demonstrate in these 12 weeks that they can absorb information, they can grow, they can kind of really inject themselves in the team. And it's not about taking on big pieces of work by themselves in the first 12 weeks. It's really about like that ability to kind of understand how a team works, take on information, and then ultimately be a better engineer at the end of it. And when one way we've tried to evaluate that is to literally go through, do the same interview that we've done in the intake, do that again. So, for example, that URL shortener, we don't tell them that at the start, but basically do that URL shortener interview again after 10 weeks and see the difference. And it's been really magnificent to see for some people how they've came in with a very basic understanding, and then after 10 weeks they were able to just draw it up and say, yep, this here and this goes in there, and then database, and then out comes this, and then you pump it back in there, and voila. And this is a really good comparison and a really good kind of sense check, or a checkpoint to kind of see, yes, they've picked up a lot of concepts. They understand a lot more at the end than what they did at the start. And then kind of that gives us a better sense and a better idea about like our confidence level about like, yes, we can really believe in that person can grow and can ultimately move on with that.
How awesome. That begs the question though, who are the people who do these interviews for the internship program? And
Yep.
Is it the same people who do that in the beginning and then at the end?
Yes. Yeah, we try to be very consistent in these. And what we've really done is that we basically have a group of 2 or 3 engineers that are like senior engineers from Redbubble do the initial interviews, and then the same group basically does the assessment after 10, 11 weeks. And we have that direct comparison. And often myself is included in that as well. Just because I'm running the project, and I'm running the program. So just have that continuity and have that ability to compare against the initial interview. So that has been very helpful and super insightful.
I bet it sounds like it. So like not be afraid of having the same interview twice after a
Yes.
while. With that said, I'm really interested in how many, if you can tell me how many or what percentage of the incoming interns you end up hiring. Is there kind of like a number that you are aiming for, or it always depends on the quality of the engineers?
It's interesting. It varied over the years, and so like I said before, like one year we literally had work experience only, where we didn't set a target for hiring, and then in a couple of years we set ourselves a target of about 30 to 50% of interns we want to take on. So just for context, our engineering group is not massive. We have about 60 engineers, and we had an intake of about 5 interns, so in one batch. So we try to take on 2 to 3 interns after the round, and in a couple of years it worked really well. In another year, like you said, we didn't quite get there for various reasons, but mainly because we couldn't quite get people to grow as much as we wanted them to. So yes, we set ourselves targets, but we've not always managed to reach them.
Right. And you shouldn't reach the target for the sake of having the ability
Exactly.
to say that you reached the target.
Exactly. So just on building on that, because I think the main reason is that obviously if we hire someone, we want to give them the commitment to kind of succeed or have a chance of succeeding. And if we just fill the quota, so to speak, then we're kind of cheating on ourselves, but we're also cheating on the interns, because they get just hired for the sake of filling a spot, and that's not fair on them, and it's not always going to work out, or rarely going to work out.
Right. This almost resonates as like with the relationship, but it's just in my mind. So with that said, if we can talk a little more, I know you mentioned growth and you mentioned communications, but like, is there a list of what you expect of incoming engineers when they have completed the internship program?
So we kind of try and tie that back a little bit to our growth framework, and as many other companies, we have, whether you call it a career ladder, growth framework, or something, but something to support engineers in their growth over the years, and that's what we're trying to use for the internship as well. So we're really trying to make sure that after, say, if they just hypothetically come in at level 1 or 2 on our growth framework, we want to kind of assess them then to make sure that they've reached level 3 or 4 when they're exiting, and that then really that then kind of translates back to they're able to kind of fix up small bugs by themselves independently, or they're able to contribute to team planning, or something that maps to the level. But this is kind of how we're trying to be as objective as possible, and not just being kind of like, hey, Tom said this is an awesome person, we should hire them, but trying to map that back as every other engineer to some sort of growth framework and an impact metric, and have them assessed that way.
Um, what are some of the steps? We could have a whole show about the growth framework and the career
Yes,
ladder.
definitely.
But just let me ask you, when an intern enters the company, how long are they considered as an intern at that time, or are they considered as a junior software engineer, or what are some of the differentiators, if any, for the new incoming engineers who completed the engineering program?
Yeah, so they come in as interns, and I mean the thing with interns is really so interns is what we probably call, the probably best definition is a time boxed kind of limited or 3-month contract, so to speak, right? Like interns are not necessarily hired as full-time engineers right away, but they can transition into that piece. So, and interns can then potentially come in at pretty much any level. Like you could have a 3-month internship for someone that has been in the industry for half a year already, or a year already. So that's kind of where the comparison between individual people is sometimes not quite as easy, because if there's 2 people in an internship program and one is straight out of university or out of a boot camp, the other person has had a 6-month gig at another company, then one might be on level 1, the other might be on level 4. But that's kind of where then we're trying to see how they're growing in that time. And then if the person that is on number 1 ends up on level 3 after 12 weeks, but the person that comes in on level 4 stays on level 4, then we're not necessarily then comparing 4 against 3 on the level, we're comparing how much they've grown. And this is for us really the most important metric to kind of assess whether they should become whether it should become an engineer or not. And that then translates on towards that, if we hire them towards the junior program, and later on is like really that growth between levels and growth over the years. That's the most important metric there.
I love that. It's like comparing people to themselves rather than to each other. It's like
exactly
so awesome.
Exactly.
So awesome. So if we want to put it in context, it almost sounds like a 2-step program to get into the company as a full-time engineer with the contract. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yes. So when we had the internship, it was really, we ran it as an internship program with that 3-month contract. Then we had the assessment period, and the people that we've taken on afterwards, they then came in as full-time. We hired them as full-time engineers. What we then try to do with those people, we've tried to put a bit more structure around it as well, not just hired them as engineers and then said good luck, but kind of gave them a little bit of support and structure as well, by trying to rotate them through different teams to get them exposure for different technologies, different kind of domains of the company, and try to kind of give them a bit of breadth rather than going deep into one area right away. Mm-hmm. Mixed successes there, but I can talk about that a little bit later. But so yeah, it's a 2-step process: internship and then full-time engineering after, if they get taken on.
All right. I have a question here, which is kind of intriguing. Do you keep in touch with the people who you didn't hire as an engineer?
Not everybody, but some, yes. Like for example, I just had an exchange on LinkedIn the other day with a former intern who reached out to say, who basically gave a referral to another role and said you should look at this person to hire. So a lot of them, yes, not everybody, but I still am in contact with a good chunk of former interns that are not with a company anymore.
How awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, let's talk about the not so shiny part. What are some of the mistakes that you can share with our listeners, and how did they come around, so that if somebody's listening and wants to start up an internship program, they won't make these mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so the program that I shared is kind of obviously based on mistakes, some partly. So one of the very early mistakes that we made, that we had a dedicated team, so to speak. We brought 4 interns in, we put them in a corner and said, please rewrite this system or this project a little bit for us, and come back at the end. Not necessarily as a test for them to see whether they can do it, but just as we thought it was a decent setup. It wasn't. So that's kind of how we transitioned then to embedding teams, or embedding them in teams, and really give them the real kind of experience to work in a product team with product managers and designers and all of it. The other thing, and that's something that we're honestly still working through, is and that's something that's taken us quite a while to understand, is to hire the interns that you can actually support and potentially actually take on. So if we're thinking about a range of skills that people might bring, one being never been exposed to any kind of software engineering, to people that have gone through a boot camp or have been coding since they've been 10. They never had an official job, but they basically have been coders for a long time, even though they haven't been paid for coding. Every company can probably really support somewhere on this level. So not every company can support people that have never seen code before. That needs a certain structure, it needs a certain setup to really support those people. So finding that level of kind of baseline skills that you can support during the internship and after is really crucial. And that's something we haven't gotten right. And we're still kind of evolving, is to not take on people that we actually can't support and we can't set up for success, but only take those people in that have that baseline level of engineering that we can then use to kind of really build up over time. So that's a really crucial learning for us, and something that's not easy to get right, because it's very hard to know what that level is for each company.
Right, and you always want to hire as many good people as possible.
Exactly, and you don't want to have an internship program where you kind of go in with the expectation to bring someone in full time, but then you realize actually we can't support those people. We don't have the structure. We don't have the processes to really support those people, and then it's a disappointment for the interns, obviously, because they don't get taken on, but it's also a disappointment for the company because the program didn't actually yield much itself. So that it's so hard to get it right, but it's crucial to understand what level you can support.
Right. Building on the support part, we haven't talked much about what are some of these support systems in place, and I am extremely curious because you said the interns join specific teams and they function as team members, and they have a mentor outside the team, and they do one-on-ones with the team lead. How often or what kind of feedback do they get, and what are some of the other things that you do to support them while they are in the internship program?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's again another thing that's not easy to get right. Like with interns, what we've tried to do is really same as with every other engineer, is to set some goals up front, and to really kind of there's a kind of a basic checklist of you should get exposed to kind of these and these things. Like you should probably run a planning session or run a retro, for example. But then there's also some more kind of personal goals around, like at the end of this program, you should be able to say write a small feature, or lead or pair lead a small feature or something like that. And this is something that we're going to sit down with the interns and work that through at the start, and really try and identify, based on the interview, but also based on their previous experience and based on their ambition, about like, all right, what do you want to achieve here? What are the things that you wanna kind of be proud of at the end? And then that's something we can actively support them in the day-to-day and really kind of make sure that they're working towards it, but also then give feedback on and say, hey, by the way, we're not quite there yet. Here's some things that I've observed. How about we try something else there, or we work on that a bit more.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And also another thing that just came to my mind about the support system. You said that they start together as a group. How much are they encouraged to keep in touch while they are completing the engineering internship program?
Very strongly. This is something that we found that is really helpful for the group, is to just, and I think most of the intakes we had, they basically caught up every week, and they just sat down together for half an hour, 45 minutes, and talked about their experiences, what they did in the last week, anything. They kind of supported each other. So this is just, it's been really helpful for the internship group to kind of just get together and as peers talk about what they experience and support each other, and not just have someone that's been around the company for 4 or 5 years kind of talk to them. So just have it as peers and people that see eye to eye ultimately. So that's been super helpful and super important.
Also, one more thing, just so we can get all the information out of you that you can share. The mentors, and I am imagining that with the size that you have mentioned, every team gets an intern, or almost every team gets an intern.
Yeah, about half or 2/3 of our teams have interns. Yeah, so quite a good chunk. Yes.
So how are those teams determined? And also, who are the mentors? Is it a voluntary activity, or is it pointed?
So the teams get ultimately chosen by who's working, what the focus of the team, and who can support an intern during that time. So depending on, so some teams might only be 2 or 3 people large at a certain point in the year, and it might not be a good fit. And some teams might be going really deep into, like, for example, one team we found it really hard to find interns for is our infrastructure team, because they're kind of it's usually not something interns learn in the boot camp or have exposure to in university or something. And then it's not only kind of learning how to work in a company, but also getting exposed to a completely new domain, and that's really hard. So kind of finding that right level of easiness of entry, or easiness of learning or adopting the domain, and having enough people there to support. That's kind of how we're, and again, like we haven't gotten it right always. We tried once to put someone in our infrastructure team, and it was quite rough, and it wasn't very pleasant from from all we could gather. With the mentors itself, like we've been running on a voluntary basis, and a lot of our engineers have actually put their hand up, and we often had to send people away and said, sorry, not this year, we're kind of full. So people have been really eager to take internship or take mentorship over for an intern and support them through that. And for the interns that have stayed on, that relationship has actually lasted. So there is still today, there's former interns catching up with their former mentors on a regular basis, just to exchange and to have a chat and figure out whether there's some support that can still be provided. So it's actually been great to see that these relationships have lasted as well.
Yeah, how awesome! That sounds really great to be able to join such a company. We are kind of concluding our conversation, but you kind of hinted at this. I am curious to see, how often do you start a new internship program?
We've tried to do it once a year. So it kind of lines up with, in Australia, the big holiday gap for universities in November, December. We couldn't do one last year, unfortunately, with COVID and all the things. But we've had a pretty good run for 5-6 years before that, where we've literally have taken on interns every single year at around the same time, and then worked through them until January, February in the following year.
And with that said, now you are kind of a seasoned internship manager. In your opinion, what are the things that make an engineering program or internship program for engineers successful?
Yeah, so coming back to one that I've kind of talked a little bit before, understanding the level of interns you can accept. The other thing that I probably haven't mentioned a lot of is to kind of be very clear and open with everybody, not just with the interns, but with the people at the company as well. But what do you want to achieve? What do you want the company to achieve? But also, what do you want to get out of it for the interns? And state that very clearly up front, which again, coming back to your question about like, are the interns or former interns still in touch? And I think that has helped a lot with kind of getting people to not feel frustrated afterwards. We've been very open and very clear, said, look, here's what we want to achieve. Here's what you have to bring to kind of be considered as a full-time engineer after. And then we were very, very open and very honest with people and said, look, this worked out. It was awesome. Or sorry, we couldn't quite get you there. And just that openness and honesty upfront is really important and sets the expectations for everybody involved. And the third one is, and I mentioned it a couple of times, is to basically treat interns like any other engineer. Like they're just part of the group ultimately. They're adults, they're engineers. They should not be treated specifically other than providing some extra support, but embed them in teams, make them part of everything, the rituals, the planning, pair with them like everybody else, and that's ultimately the best experience we can give them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. That sounds like a really good deal. With that said, we have touched on a lot of things, and I think if someone has listened to this conversation, they are much better prepared to start their own internship program than they were before, because you were kind enough to share a lot of things. With that said, is there anything else that we haven't touched on and you think is important to be mentioning here?
It's a good question. Not that I can think of right now. Just thinking through what we talked about, and like you said, it was quite a bit. So at this point, no, there's nothing else I can think of that really stands out as a special another thing.
Thank you for sharing so much about your internship program. And if our listeners would like to know more about you or follow your work, where can they do that?
The best way is probably to go to Medium, find my blog or my articles on Medium, where I write. I try to write at least twice a month. Has slowed down a little bit lately. The other way is LinkedIn, where I'm present, which I check regularly. So these two mediums are probably best.
All right. Thank you so much. Dearest listeners, as we have talked about, you need to be open about what your internship program brings to the company, and you need to be open about what you can bring to your engineers and what your expectations are towards your incoming engineers, and you need to give them a lot of support within the team and across teams and within their internship program team, and learn from your mistakes, because as you were kind enough to share, you can't get everything right from the beginning, and perfect is just a man-made concept. So let's be agile and always learn. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about the internship program at Redbubble. And with that said, thank you for joining us today. Dearest listeners.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Dearest listeners, today my guest was Tom Sommer. He is the Director of Engineering at Redbubble, and today we talked about a successful internship program for software engineers. Thank you for joining us. I am Karolina Tóth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.